Hello my friends and welcome. Let's go straight to the northeastern region of Crimea. This is the Arbatskaya Spit and here's the location of the Russian FSB headquarters. This is not a hotel, resort or something. This belongs to the Russian government. The building was built for purpose to accommodate Russian special forces of FSB, border control and the units which are fighting in Ukraine. And of course Russian intelligence services were presented there. The building was visited by Ukrainian drones. What is interesting, if you check out this Kaboom, that it happened from within, inside the building. It's very interesting. Once again, so it seems like the drone went straight to the window and the Kaboom happened inside. Is it some sort of the lucky shot or our guys especially trained for that? I'm gonna move myself here for you to see better. So the building is gone. There was the fire and the next one was visited by the drone as well. We are not sure what was happening inside, but Russian military bloggers confirmed the losses for the Russian FSB. So Ukraine did absolutely a tremendous job here. I'm also surprised about the payload Ukrainian drones were carrying. Just look at those kabooms. Usually if you cover that kind of the long distance and it's 160 kilometers away from Ukrainian territory, you need to have less payload for the longer distance. But with FP2 drones, it seems like Ukraine managed to get both the range and the power. So all of the buildings of the same structure, they were kaboomed by numerous of the drones. The biggest building was hurt several of the times. You can see they fly and they kaboom from inside. Yeah, absolutely huge blast. It looks like the aviation gliding bomb, and this FSB facility is totally gone, like annihilated. I have never seen such a dramatic circumstances for any sort of the Russian bases because of the drone attack. Well, maybe only spiderweb operation where we saw lots of the Russian airplanes on fire, but here it looks similar. Yeah, of course, Russian official propaganda says that it's just a hotel, Ukraine bombed civilian infrastructure, but no. This belongs to FSB, and we have the confirmation about it from both sides, Ukraine and Russia. Well, not official Russia, but Russian military bloggers again continue to say about real devastation which Ukraine brought them previous night. My friends, just a short reminder, please press like to this video and subscribe for the channel. It matters really a lot. And if you want to support this channel directly, you may do it on Patreon. The link for it is in the video description right below, or on membership of YouTube channel by pressing button join. With your kind support, I am capable to film videos almost every day, so you are employing me for this job. Thank you so much, guys. You are awesome. And now let's continue with the video. And that Ukrainian attack is just one from multiple of the Ukrainian middle and long-range strikes which happen on occupied territory. Here's the map. You may see all of those yellow dots are Ukrainian middle-range strikes performed by our drone operators for the recent few weeks. Ukraine really aims to cut Russian logistics and Russian military bases. But at first, just remember how Ukraine performed. For the last year, Ukraine intensified the strikes on the Russian air defense systems. The Russian losses in air defense for this month alone is around 20 units. Just imagine 20 units for the last 21 days, it's roughly 1 unit per day. And I don't think that Russia is definitely capable to produce an air defense system per day. And they need those not just on occupied territories to protect their logistics, but they need also to protect, well, at first Putin, of course, and other Russian infrastructure. Russia is big. This is, from one hand, is advantage in case of the, for example, attack of the vast groups of the armies like it happened in the Second World War. But at the same time, in the war of 21st century, when we speak about drones, it's a great disadvantage for Russia. They absolutely should have the massive production of the air defense systems if they want to protect their logistics, first of all. That's what they want to achieve, yes, success on the front lines. And secondary, of course, their infrastructure for the oil and Putin. Well, for Putin, of course, they will find those air defense systems, but Russia definitely struggles. And it was Ukrainian plan, well played, and now we see how it uncovers and how Ukraine performs those unprecedented strikes. Then Russians do not expect those to happen. You see, this is how the usual road close to the front lines looks like. The anti-drone protection, basically a tunnel with nets that allows some of the logistics to happen. There is also electronic warfare established close to the front lines, but further away, nothing is happening. That makes Russian logistics very vulnerable, and the Russian mill bloggers, they're calling, we need to take some action, we need to protect now all of the roads. But imagine the resources needed to protect the Russian military, and that is the advantage of Ukraine, because Ukraine itself is also not a small country. So all of the roads, even on occupied territories by Russia, They're big, they're long. Russia simply doesn't have enough resources in its military budget to protect all of those roads. Russia doesn't have the mass-produced electronic warfare that could be effective against modernized Ukrainian radio-controlled drones even. And Ukraine continue to use fiber optic controlled drones. Russia too, but they're presented. And the Ukrainian FP1 and FP2 drones, well, for them, this kind of the drone protection may not even work. Against small FPV drones, yes, but FP1, FP2, I don't think so. They're very heavy, they will penetrate this net and perform the job very precisely. And for Russia, it's more of a problem than for Ukraine, because Russia doesn't have those very effective middle-range drones like FP1 and FP2. They also could be long-range drones, by the way. Well, Russians have Landsats, but effectiveness of those, I would say it dropped down. Maybe because Ukraine is using modern-day electronic warfare, but I haven't seen the videos with the Russian Landsat effective operation published massively. In my yesterday's video, I showed you how Russian Landsat hit Gepard air defense system of Ukraine, but it happens kind of rarely, and all of the Russian channels were presenting it as the victory. Okay, we hit Gepard tank, but it's the first success of the Russian army with a Gepard since 2022. But at the same time, Russia loses a system per day, whether it's similar to Gepard Shilka or advanced air defense like S-300, Buk, Tor. There are tons of the videos to prove that, and I regularly show you them on my channel. Oh, by the way, by the time I'm recording this video, we have obtained one more image in Donetsk Oblast. It happened yesterday. Very fresh update, my friend. So Russia lost this, I think this is Uragan. Yeah, it's Uragan, I already cross-checked it, and it was initially spotted by the drone and later on kaputted. It was stationary on the road, and again FP1 or FP2 drone was used. As you might see, they're flying very precisely. I remember those first strikes of Ukrainian drones in Crimea, how they were clumsy and there was a huge latency of the signal, so it was understandable that our drone operators were struggling. Here, it's not looking like that any longer. In most of the cases, drones are flawlessly flying to hit the targets, and you saw with this building before that the drone operator managed to get into the window and kaboom the building from inside, causing more devastations. So Ukraine mastered this technology. Ukraine has the access to Starlink. Thank you, Elon Musk, I guess. I don't know. Well, maybe after all, Ukrainian Defense Ministry and personally Defense Minister Davydov, because of his actions, we have this technological jump in Ukraine. We have reforms, we have cooperation with Starlink, we have the introduction of machine vision, AI, which could potentially be used in the nearby future to aim the targets and maybe minimize the human factor in operating the drones. That's the next step of the evolution, but what we see is already tremendous change for Ukrainian army and technologies in general. For the last, I would say, half a year, Ukraine managed to get those things flying precisely. Ukraine managed to mass produce those drones, and Ukraine is successful not just with the long-range strikes, but middle-range as well. And for sure, it wasn't a decoy, as you see. It was a big kaboom, and one more successful operation of the Ukrainian drone army. And the other reason why the middle strikes are more problem for Russia than for Ukraine, because Russia is attacking. Okay, so Ukraine may keep the forces in defense, but Russia needs to send in general more of the supplies throughout those roads, creating more of the potential targets for Ukrainian drone operators. And all of the attempts for Russia to protect their supplies, they lead to more losses in Russian air defense systems. The Russian air defense cannot protect themselves from the drones flying. It's the big problem for Russia, and I don't think that they'll have an imminent solution. I think in the coming year they will not develop some sort of the tool to cancel those Ukrainian middle and long-range strikes that demolish Russian army from, I would say, within. Here I opened the Russian channel and they published this map, and they say that Ukraine has hit all of the Russian big refineries. The last week, Ukraine even disabled one of the refineries in Moscow. With a surprise attack, Russians were not ready for that. And that's the most protected area, Moscow city, Moscow outskirts. Nevertheless, Ukrainian drones managed to penetrate 3 out of 4 defense lines which Russia put, air defense lines. So from the big refineries, just Omsky and Angarsky refineries were not hit, but they're far away. Nevertheless, Ukraine, I guess, will visit those in the coming future. Ukraine constantly develops its technology, increasing the range and the power of the drones and the payload which they may carry. Okay, so Russians film more and more of those videos from the roads, supply logistics, and how they lose absolutely everything. Their BMPs, their trucks, their Buhanka vans, everything of that has been hit by Ukrainian, even FPV drones with longer range. Somehow Ukraine may send even FPV drones by 40 kilometers, sometimes even 50, to hit the targets very precisely with less expensive drones, because after all, FP1 and FP2, they're more expensive than standard FPV. So yeah, Russians are completely in shock of what is happening with their logistics. They have tremendous losses, it has never been before, but of course they should expect those losses to rise, and basically it cuts all of the Russian ambitions on the front lines. For the stable territorial gains, you need to have the stable logistics, but if you have risks on the way, it erases all of the plans for the future attacks. It's the problem for the local commanders even to plan some of the offensive actions, because they don't know whether they will have enough resources for the future attack or no. Maybe their convoy will be busted by Ukrainian drones on the way. And what is next? When is the next convoy coming? And whether it's going to be the same unsuccessful, or whether it's going to break through their positions and finally supply their units with some of the provision for the future assaults. So it's the biggest issue for the Russian army nowadays, that their logistics and command centers are being flatlined, and I would say it's the end. Russia cannot be successful during the summer campaign if they will not fix their issue with logistics. They cannot do it. Well, at least I don't see the variant of how potentially it could be done. Every day there are some of the reports from the Russian channels like Kherson direction, our shore. We have losses, enemy had attacked us with massive drone strike, forever glory, rest in peace, brothers. I monitor Russian channels, and the messages like that are all across. Well, there are some of the propaganda channels affiliated with the Russian Defense Ministry and so on, but even they sometimes are saying of how the situation is not good for Russian army, how they cannot break through, how they bogged down basically on the front lines. Okay, so Russians already know the names of the Ukrainian drones. They say, oh, it's the double fin construction. It is Luty. Luty made in Ukraine, of course, on Antonov factory, by the way. And it was spotted in Moscow region, by the way. Also, drones were flying to Kstova, maybe to finish their refinery, one of the biggest ones in Russia. Ukraine performs those long-range strikes every night, as well as Russia. But for Russia, they basically hit the same facilities and also civilian infrastructure. They are terrorizing Ukrainian population to force some of the changes from within, to crack Ukrainian society. But instead, Russians just cause more hatred to themselves from Ukrainian population. It is not the solution. Well, sometimes Russians also hit Ukrainian trains, Ukrainian logistics, Ukrainian command posts, but it is happening for more than 4 years already. Ukraine is more adapted to those attacks, plus Ukraine has massive production of the drone interceptors. Well, Russians also have drone interceptors, but the production is not that massive compared to Ukraine. Plus, Russians have to secure the vast territory of Russia. Ukraine is, after all, smaller, so for air defense, Ukraine is way more capable than Russia. So again, long-range strikes, it's more problem for our enemy side than for Ukraine itself. Also, Russia just cannot physically cause the economical devastation for Ukraine by hitting oil ports, refineries, or something like that. Ukrainian economy does not depend on the black substance called oil. Plus, Ukraine has direct support from European allies and also Americans, by the way, via Europeans, paid by European money, but nevertheless, United States continue military cooperation with Ukraine. Yes, even under Donald Trump, and I hope that with the next president, the cooperation will get even better. And guys, just look at what happened the last night. Ukrainian massive drone strikes on Russian territory. Ukraine nowadays even sends more drones on Russia than Russia sends their drones on Ukraine. And Russia is forced to protect their vulnerable economic infrastructure, oil, first of all, and maybe only after protect supply routes on occupied territories, protect their headquarters in Crimea. This is how it is. After analyzing all of those footages, videos of Ukrainian middle-range strikes, experts come to conclusion that Ukrainian goal is to cut the road that connects Mariupol and Taganrog, Russian Federation. This is the main supply road for the Russian logistics towards Donetsk Oblast, the southern part of it, Zaporizhia, and partially Kherson. So basically, this road, Mariupol and Taganrog. Mariupol, southern part of Donetsk, after it supply goes through all of those smaller roads to Melitopol and also to Gulay Pole. This is the place where Russians are now trying to attack, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. Ukraine is also counterattacking in the same direction. So this is disaster, definitely disaster for the Russian army. And the only robust supply that Russian army still has is actually the Kerch Bridge. Should we expect something to happen with this construction, and whether Ukraine has enough tools to definitely disable it for a very long time? I'm not sure, guys. There is the big question. But this bridge plays a key role. That's why it was built. Not for commercial purposes, but for military ones, because Russia has lots of the military bases and they may accumulate their resources in Crimea. Well, it's also difficult for them right now because the Ukrainian drones, they're visiting Crimea too, and also Russian air defense is suffering, Russian military airfields. I'll just show you the image from Belbek and how that base lost some of the equipment. It became a daily routine for Ukraine to conduct those middle-range and long-range strikes on Russia. Okay, Zelensky is visiting northern regions of Ukraine. For example, this is Chernigiv Oblast. Slavutic town, very beautiful, by the way. I was there once. Well, Ukraine again emphasizes about reinforcement of Ukrainian defense of the northern regions. And for this purpose, he decided to speak with local commanders, with the local government authorities about how the things are ongoing. Because the building of defense lines is not usually financed by military, but by the local governments. And it's very important. And then you heard that, for example, European Union finances not just army, but also Ukrainian government. Yes, because government money are also used for Ukrainian protection, for restoring power supplies, for building new roads, for restoring old roads, because it's also important for logistics. Well, this Zelensky's visit is kind of interesting because, again, they're saying about the possible threat for the northern regions of Ukraine. I think since the last week, Ukrainian officials have started to tell about the possible escalation of war towards the northern regions of Ukraine, Chernigiv, Kiev, Zhytomyr, and possible attacks from Belarus and Bryansk Oblast of Russia. Definitely something is happening. Lukashenko, a potato dictator of Belarus, is taking part in military drills, nuclear military drills, where Iskander ballistic missiles are being used to simulate some of the strike on some of the territory. The military exercises were conducted in cooperation with the Russian army. Surprise, surprise. The strike with Iskander. He doesn't look happy. Unlike Putin. Putin is usually cheerful during those exercises. Lukashenko, he looks like he is forced to do it. It is written on his face. He understands that the military escalation may bring end to his political career and maybe to his personal life. Lukashenko mentioned that Belarus may enter the war in case of its being attacked by someone, but we understand that Belarus or Russia, they don't need the casus belli. Just to remind you, the current full-scale war, which is the biggest one since the Second World War, was justified by a couple of the strikes on Russian UAZ vehicle on occupied territory and a known garage that Russia proclaims was the FSB headquarters, but no, it wasn't. Just a random abandoned building, and they say that Ukraine hit all of that on occupied territory, so Russia will protect republics, and here we go. So I think that the escalation, maybe it is possible, because Russia doesn't have the way out of how to propel on the current front line, so they may came out with decision to start new front lines in Sumy region, Chernigiv, Kievska Oblast, we'll see. But also Belarus may escalate against other countries. In my latest video, I told about the possible military operation in Baltic states. Well, it's better for you to check that out. It's kind of the long video, 30 minutes long, but I put my opinion of whether that attack is possible or not. And relative to protection of the NATO eastern borders, actually we have great news. I'm surprised, guys, honestly surprised by Donald Trump's decision. After all, he decided to send 5,000 troops to Poland, sending additional 5,000 troops. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Yeah, of course, he emphasized the relationship between him and President Karol Nawrocki. Good. Absolutely outstanding news. Before Donald Trump canceled the deployment of those forces, some sources say that he might send the forces from Germany. It doesn't really matter that much, I would say, because Germany is further away from Russia, so it's better to reinforce the eastern flank of NATO in this case. But I think that those forces, those servicemen in Germany, they're mostly doing routine handling job for the American bases in Ramstein. I think they're not the combat units, I guess. I could be not correct with that, But the good thing that American presence will be in Poland, which is awesome. I hope they'll also deploy forces to Baltic states, because the threat for Baltics is much greater than for Poland. I think that Putin understands that Poland, from the military perspective, could be the second Ukraine for him, where he will bog down absolutely with his army. For Baltic states, geographically, it could be a different outcome for Putin. Well, hopefully he will not start that operation. But of course, NATO should be ready for that. And we also have good news for Ukraine from the United States of America. Well, even though there is no direct military support for Ukraine, but the United States approved selling of the Hawk air defense systems for Ukraine for the price of $108 million. Ukraine, of course, needs all of the types of the air defense. Hawks are also capable, and why I'm surprised, because the war in Iran is, I would say, not over. There are the signs that the hot stage of the confrontation may spark once again, so the United States would need to deploy their air defense to protect their bases, their allies, and it's very important also at the same time to not forget about Ukraine and also support Ukraine with the air defense. So yeah, it's the great thing that at least they approve selling of the systems. And those moves, they're telling that maybe there are some of the sane people still in American politics who are close to the White House administration and may influence previously strange decisions done by Donald Trump. For example, then he canceled the deployment of the forces to Poland. Now he approved that, presenting it as some sort of the victory because of the good relations with Polish president. Okay, let it be like that, but the fact is the fact, the forces will be deployed and the previous decision has been cancelled. It's great. It means that someone told Donald Trump that it's better to do like that. It's better to keep the presence in eastern borders of NATO bloc. So the best news probably I heard about NATO already for a very, very long time. Alright guys, it's all what I want to tell you for today, and stand by for one more video update, and also please support my job on Patreon. The link for it is in the video description right below. You may also join YouTube membership by pressing button join, and only with your support my job is really possible. My friends, thank you so much for it, and also don't forget to press your like to this video and subscribe to the channel. Stay awesome guys, I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are, and have a great time.